In today's video, you will hear some of the nicest things people have done but did not tell anyone. If you like my content, do like and subscribe. I am creating content to try to raise funds for my dad's treatment. So if you want to support his ongoing battle, the GoFundMe link is in the description section below. Thank you so much for being here. And now let's get started. Story 1. The owner of my company built a village in Nicaragua. He was there on vacation, visiting a town, when a few kids in the square saw a white European gringo and asked him for some money. He took them, bought them food, and gave them some money. The next day, he was out again, and a bigger group of kids were there waiting for him. He took them out to eat and gave them more money and candy. By the third day, there was a crowd of kids. News travels fast. He realized he couldn't keep doing this and decided to figure out what the town needed instead. Years later, here's what he's built: affordable homes for the poor, with very low interest loans to pay for them. If the residents keep the homes and area clean, avoid getting drunk or using drugs, and educate their kids, they can stay. The homes are usually 2 to 3 room cinder block buildings, but they're much better than makeshift shacks. A school for poor kids, equipped with computers, school supplies, and meals. The parents pay as much as they can afford, but many can't pay anything, so he gets donations to ensure as many children as possible can attend. A soccer field and practice facility. For many poor kids in Latin America, sports are their only chance to escape poverty. He expects to be able to field a professional team in another 3 to 4 years. A free museum of pre-Columbian pottery and artifacts. They have a blog. He had planned this for a while, as collecting artifacts is his hobby. However, when the police saw a gringo buying it all, they assumed he was trying to smuggle the pieces out of the country. Illegal, of course. So, they tossed him in jail in Managua. 3 days later, a large delegation of town officials, including the mayor, parents, and over 2,000 students from Granada, went to the police station and demanded his release. They told the national police chief that he needed to be let out right now. After an hour of talking with the mayor, they released him and apologized. Each month, my wife and I pay for 5 kids to attend school. They're kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. It's not much, but I know it's going to good use down there. Story 2. About 6 or 7 years ago, my girlfriend at the time and I were vacationing in Chicago. It was our last night, so we hit up a local bar and were just hanging out, drinking $12 martinis. This homeless guy walks in and comes over to us with a handful of postcards, offering them to us. I didn't need them, so I tried to give him $5 for 2. He refused. I then tried to give him $10, but he still refused, so I asked him what he wanted. He told me he was just hungry and wanted something to eat. The bartender had to walk all the way around the bar to approach the guy. The homeless man ordered a cheeseburger. The bartender looked clearly uncomfortable and asked him if he had any money. I jumped in and said it was on me. I ordered a second cheeseburger and 2 orders of fries to go with it. While his food was being made, we sat and talked to him, just a normal guy who had lost his job and then his hope. I felt terrible spending a couple $100 in a bar, while this guy could do so much with that same amount. When his food came out, he thanked me profusely. I awkwardly shoved all the cash I had into his hand and wished him good luck. It turned out that the bartender was actually the owner. He came back around and told me he'd never seen anyone do something like that before. I offered a feeble reply about how it just seemed right at the time, and mentioned that we were leaving because I'd spent the last of my drinking money. But he wouldn't let us go. He kept giving us round after round on the house. Closing time came soon after, and as we were heading to the door, he stopped us again. He was dating one of the waitresses and wanted to take us out to a late-night bar. We ended up hanging out in a locked-up bar with her while he did some paperwork. We played darts and drank before finally staggering back to our hotel. I can't remember the homeless guy's face or what he was wearing, but I still have that postcard of the Sears Tower. Story 3. I work as a meat clerk at a major natural foods chain. Every week, there's an old man who comes into my store. His name is Sid. Sid is a picky old man who forgets things. He often calls me George. My name is Robert. He gives the clerks a hard time, asking for special things and generally being a bit of a curmudgeon. No one really wants to help him, but one day I was nice to him, and ever since then, he comes in asking if George is around. One day, while I was helping him, he told me that he had lost his wife several years ago, that he forgets things, and that it's generally lousy being old. No secret there, but he's lonely, and I felt bad for him. I often give him special service that takes a great deal of time. It can be a bit of a pain, and my co-workers sometimes give me grief for it. This past week, while I was helping Sid, he asked me to take his hand. He firmly grabbed it, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Thank you for being my friend." I started to tear up and thanked him for being my friend, telling him that he was a nice man. It's not so much that I'm doing something incredibly nice for Sid, or even that it's the nicest thing I've ever done. It's simple stuff. It sounds cheesy, but the impact of small actions can make a huge difference to some people. I honestly had no idea that what I was doing meant so much to him. Story 4. It was 2007, I think. I was going to see Weezer, not sure who else was there. I went to the show by myself, since I don't really have anyone to go to shows with these days. While I was waiting, I saw a younger couple, probably in their late teens. They were a really cute couple, and for some reason, it struck a chord with me. They were really excited to be there. Fast forward to the doors opening, and I make my way to the general admission line. For those who don't know, this is the line to get on the floor in most cases, as opposed to the seats. I ended up standing right behind these two. The boyfriend went through first, his ticket got scanned, and he walked in. Then the girlfriend went next, but it turned out she had a seated ticket. It was pretty rough for them because, obviously, the boyfriend had already scanned his floor ticket, so it was either they watched the show separately, or they go home. They both looked pretty bummed. It was an easy decision for me to trade my floor ticket for her seated one, and getting the two of them in together more than made up for my not being on the floor. They seemed really happy, and it made my day. Story 5. This story is about a friend I knew years ago. He worked at a hospital cleaning rooms. One night, he was cleaning as usual when a boy saw him pass by the door to his room, where he was a cancer patient. The boy called out and asked him to come in. The boy was alone, very sick, and thought my friend was Jason from the Power Rangers. This was back when it was new and popular. His family wasn't there, and he was scared. He wasn't feeling well at all. So, my friend stayed with him, pretending to be Jason and doing whatever he could to cheer the kid up. But the boy was sicker than anyone realized, and while my friend was visiting, he crashed. He passed away without his family by his side, but my friend was there to help ease his fear, staying with him until the end. That night, my friend went home and cried over what had just happened. I lost touch with him a few years later, but I hope he's doing well. He was going through hard times himself, and with his good heart, I really hope things worked out for him. Story 6. When I was in high school, my best friend was a kid named Mac. He was the only Jew at our Catholic school, and some of the kids picked on him for it. During the summer between our freshman and sophomore year, I got a phone call from an unknown number. It was Mac, asking if I could give him a ride from some random place out near the cornfields, on the fringe of the city. When we picked him up, he was bloody, with various cuts on his body and bruises on his arms. I didn't ask him about it, and he didn't say anything. A few months later, toward the end of our sophomore year, I started to notice that he seemed distant. I also began to hear loud, violent-sounding fights between his parents whenever I was over at his house. We both pretended not to hear them, but the look in his eyes during those fights was heartbreaking. We were close friends, so we sometimes talked on the phone after school. One night, during one of our conversations, it got quiet for a few seconds before he told me, "I think I'm going to kill myself." I was stunned. He had never said anything like that before, never mentioned being depressed. I wasn't sure if he was serious, so I tried to watch him carefully, but I didn't take any action. That was until he kept bringing it up. One day, when I was over at his house, he started talking quietly about how he was deciding between two ways to do it. Either being decapitated by a train or shooting himself in the face with his father's shotgun. He had apparently been researching both methods online. It was at that point I knew I had to do something. I wasn't sure who to tell, so I went to our high school principal. That same day, Mac disappeared from class, and I was extremely nervous. Had they pulled him out of class? Or had he slit his wrists in the bathroom? I must have searched every bathroom at least 3 times that afternoon. Fortunately, he showed up later in the day while I was at my locker. He asked me frantically, "Did you tell anybody?" I knew exactly what he meant and stammered out a feeble, "No," before he hurriedly walked away. The end result of this story was that he dropped out of our school and was put on antidepressants aloft, I believe. He spent the second semester sitting at home like a zombie, but that summer, he left for the West Coast. It's been about 10 years since all of this happened, and things couldn't have worked out better for him. His grades at our school were D's and F's, but at the new high school, which appealed to his creative nature, he got A's and B's. He also made a lot of new friends and went out with multiple girls after never having had a girlfriend before. After that, he went to a decent public university on a tennis scholarship and graduated recently. About 3 years ago, he came back to town and invited me to dinner. While we were waiting for dessert, he told me with a strained voice that I had saved his life, and that he couldn't put into words how much he wanted to thank me for ratting him out. He then proceeded to explain the events of that summer day, when we had picked him up without asking any questions. His father was driving him home from 18 holes of golf, something they frequently did, when Mac made a smart-ass comment. Instead of acting like an adult, his father started beating him furiously with one hand while driving with the other. In order to escape his father's wrath, my friend, under a rain of blows, unlatched his seatbelt, opened the door, and jumped out of the car, going 30 miles an hour. He got up and hobbled into a nearby cornfield. That's when he called me from a subdivision close by. Apparently, this wasn't the first or the last time his father had physically or verbally abused him. Fortunately, his father didn't accompany him to the West Coast, so the abuse stopped. In the end, things turned out well for my friend. Almost no one I know has heard this story. The direct result for me was that my best friend of 3 years, we'd known each other since middle school, was suddenly plucked out of my life and dropped 1,000 miles away. I coped the best I could, which wasn't very well. I didn't make any good friends for the rest of high school, but the important part is that my friend survived, and when I think about the look in his eyes during those awful fights at his house versus the look he gave me when he thanked me for saving him, I know it was all worth it. Story 7. I used to work for BOA in the reverse mortgage department before Fannie Mae collapsed. I attribute the collapse of our economy to programs like that, but that's a story for another time. Often, people were promised the sun and moon to sign on to these mortgages, only to have most of the money they were promised go toward paying off existing debts, leaving them broke, but still with a home. Many of them had no way to support themselves, aside from contributions from family. I was appalled, though, by how cruel many sons and daughters were to their elderly parents. My job often involved protecting clients' money from their own family members, who wanted power of attorney to steal away their parents' earnings. This happens so frequently that if you're reading this in disbelief, like me, you're one of the rare people who wouldn't take advantage of a parent. To my point, one of my clients had a family that treated her like a burden. Her son was a lawyer, her daughter a doctor. Both had money, yet neither spent any time, effort, or funds to support their mother. Her only companion in the world was her German Shepherd, an aged dog she loved dearly. Her children saw the dog as an inconvenience, not understanding how much it meant to her. They refused to give her money for vet bills, or even dog food, so she often went without, just to provide for her dog. Her children wanted her to have the dog put to sleep so they wouldn't have to deal with it, since she couldn't afford to care for it herself. I can't tell you how much this still enrages me today. We're talking about 2 $10 bags of dog food each month to give their mother the companionship of her lifelong pet. Can you imagine? After a long conversation with her, I assured her that all would be well, and I made a decision right then and there to ensure it was. I jotted down her address and phone number, and for the past 2 years, I've sent her a $25 money order every month. It arrives at her home unsigned, with no return address, so her kids can't stop me. Where the return address goes, I simply write dog food. I know I would waste that money on something trivial, but by giving it to her, I'm providing her with quality of life, and to me, that's all that matters. Story 8. I noticed a purse on the ground right outside a supermarket. I picked it up and tried to find the owner, but had no success. So, I took the purse home, went through it, and found an ID, passport, and a small phone book. The ID belonged to a Chinese woman, about the same age as me. I was 20 at the time, and most of the entries in the phone book were written in Chinese. I could read the numbers though, so I started calling them. The numbers were long distance, and most of the people who picked up spoke little to no English. At the time, I lived with my boyfriend and his father. They both thought I was crazy for going to so much trouble. I even had to agree to pay my boyfriend's father the phone bill, which I did. After hours of trying, I finally reached someone who spoke English. He told me what I was doing was strange, and that he would never go to so much trouble for a stranger, but he gave me her grandfather's number. I called and left a message. About half an hour later, a young woman called me in tears. She was new to the country, and the purse contained all of her IDs and credit cards. She spoke limited English, but I explained that she could pick up her purse at my job the next day. When she arrived, I was the first person she saw, as I worked as the receptionist. I recognized her from her ID photo, but before I could say anything, she walked out with a confused expression, checked the suite number on the door, then walked back in. She nervously addressed me. I'm looking for, well, someone said they have your purse? I asked, placing the purse on my desk. Her jaw dropped. You're the one. You called me. I nodded and handed her the purse. I understood why she was so shocked I'm black, and I knew many Asians held prejudices against us. She kept saying, I can't believe you did this. I can't believe it's you. She started to say. I didn't expect, but stopped mid-sentence, and instead, she began to cry, seemingly ashamed. I patted her on the shoulder and told her that I'd want someone to do the same for me. But they wouldn't, she said. I don't think I would have done this for you. That stung a little, but I told her it was okay and that I was just happy she had her purse back, which I genuinely was. She thanked me, left my job, and later returned with a $50 grocery store gift card. She insisted that I accept it. I knew, at that moment, that I had changed the way she initially felt about my race, and that felt good. Story 9. I won a lawsuit and ended up with about $25,000 in the bank. I used around $8,000 to pay off my debt, spent $2,000 on toys for myself, got a new laptop, and the rest went toward helping out friends and family with their debts. I paid off $8,000 of my sister's credit card debt and spent another $2,000 on dental work and other things she needed. Then, I helped a friend who was about to lose his house by giving him $3 to $5K to cover what he needed. Honestly, I'm terrible with money. I probably would have just wasted it on stupid stuff anyway. Story 10. This is about my parents, and it's happening right now. My dad is an executive at a bank, and one of his subordinates had to take a leave of absence because her child was diagnosed with leukemia. In addition, she had to take all of her other kids, 4 of them, out of school and homeschool them, because the risk of bringing home some sort of infection from school could really compromise the child's health. So my dad is fairly high up at the bank, so he gets gifts from business partners for Christmas every year. Scotch, gift baskets, totally useless stuff. In light of the situation, my dad contacted the people who usually give him gifts and asks them to make a donation to his co-worker's family instead of sending us a bottle of scotch. Additionally, they have been getting their friends and family to help out as well, donating whatever they can. No one really knows about this, but I think it's incredibly admirable.